What's up, YouTube? Today I want to talk about Serum sampler mode, and most specifically how to slice samples inside Serum. So I'm going to use the context of a breakbeat in this example, but there's a couple of tricks a little bit later on which I think is really cool for kind of resampling stuff that you're working on inside Serum. Let's go through a quick explanation of exactly what this is. So one of the new things inside Serum 2 is the ability to drop a sample in here, like a loop or something like that, and slice it up and then trigger it via different keys on the keyboard. So here, for example, we have a couple of different slice modes. We can slice auto, and then here we can drag this kind of threshold. And then what that's going to do is it's going to kind of attempt to use the sort of audio volume as a slice marker. As you can see, you can kind of drag the threshold to kind of grab little different bits of that sample. We can also slice manual, and what that does is it auto slices, but then it gives you the ability to actually go in here and edit each one individually. So here, for example, it was slightly off. We can edit that. So that's pretty cool. So here, for example, we can trigger it using a MIDI controller, trigger different notes or different parts of that loop. So what I want to do quickly is just use this clip section here to draw in a beat. A cool thing here is we can set this to random, and then we can set it to like 1/8, and then you can see like it chops it in 1/8 lengths, and then it'll randomly choose where to play. So what we can do is we can duplicate this, copy clip, paste clip, and then for example this one we can leave randomized, and this one we can set back to normal. It's crazy how just like some simple tools like that are just so cool having them inside like your favorite synth, you know? Because now, for example, we could kind of layer that in with like a sub oscillator or stuff like that. But there's a couple of other things here which make this truly special for sampling specifically. The scan parameter, it kind of like time stretches the samples. And because we've kind of chopped it and we're using this one-shot mode, it will just time stretch just that little bit, so you don't get that like off time nature. Do you know what I mean? It's just like each hit in the drum loop is being time stretched individually. So we could kind of modulate that with an LFO or something like that. So another insanely cool thing here is this relative loop mode. So if we set forward loop on, often this tends to mess up the timing of the scan if we're changing the tempo of what we're working on. In this instance, it's not too bad, but sometimes you want to switch between one shot and forward loop, which you can actually do. So if we set up a macro and just drop it here, we can jump into matrix, and here we can see loop mode is assigned to the macro. And if we hover over and drag this, you can actually see at what mode it ends on. So we want to modulate from one shot to forward loop. So we can kind of use that as that modulation. And if you haven't seen my previous video on the remaps and custom curves, I definitely suggest checking that out because this will make a lot more sense. what we're doing here is we're using this to basically just turn that on to loop as soon as we start sweeping the macro. Okay, so now it's in forward loop mode. It doesn't say it is, but it actually is because we're modulating it here. If we set this relative loop on, what it's going to do is actually, okay, so let me make this example without relative loop. If we set this loop end down, the loop start will always be at the beginning of the sample that we've loaded, right? But if we set relative loop on, it's going to take into account where we've actually chopped it, right? So it's going to loop each individual slice, like it's going to re-trigger that, which is really, really sick. Check this out. So what I usually do is I'll set this down, and then I'll set this to modulate the LE, but backwards, down to 0, like this. And so here we could set up another LFO to create like modulation on that to just do random glitches. Maybe we can use a comb filter on this as like some kind of resonant effect. Okay, one of the other reasons why this is really, really cool, like I said in the beginning, is for like resampling. Let's just do something simple like a squelch. Okay, so say for example we make this like sort of more sequenced sound that's like a bar long. We can drag out here and then drop it in as a sample, and you see how it's kind of like dropped that loop in as a sample. Let's just mute this. So now we just have that sample playing, and we can normalize and then slice auto. So now we can create like a sequence in this clip section, like chopping up bits of that kind of sound, if you know what I mean, of that loop. And we can also glitch it like we did with that relative loop, you know? I think that about sums it up. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting that like button. If you want to support what I do here, check out the links to my Patreon in the description. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.